All right, buckle up, history buffs. We're diving deep today into the Gupta Empire.
Specifically their decline.
Right, decline. Everyone remembers the Guptas for their golden age,
Their
all that good stuff. But, like, nothing lasts forever.
Right. Empires rise and empires fall.
Exactly. So we're here to figure out why this powerful empire eventually crumbled. And get this, no sudden collapse or anything. We're talking about a slow burn, like a bunch of internal and external pressures all kind of coming together.
Yeah, almost like a historical domino effect. One domino falls and then...
Boom, the whole thing starts to wobble. I like that. Okay, so domino effect. Where do we even begin with this one?
Well, I think the Gupta's economic situation is a good place to start. Like many empires, their main source of revenue was land tax.
Makes sense, right? Need that money to keep things running, fund the military, build those temples.
Exactly. But when that revenue stream started to dry up, the empire started to feel the strain.
Okay, so what happened? Was there like a famine or something? Some ancient recession?
Well, those things always play a role. But the Guptas also had some internal policies that contributed to their economic woes. They started granting large amounts of land specifically to Brahmins and temples.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. Less land for the state equals less land to tax.
Precisely. And that means less money flowing into the imperial treasury.
Yeah, it's like when your favorite store gives out too many discounts. Eventually, they can't keep the lights on.
That's a great analogy. And as their finances weakened, it had a ripple effect throughout the empire, making it harder to defend those vast borders.
So this is where we see those notorious Huna invaders coming into play. I've heard about their fierce raids, but I never really connected them to the Gupta decline.
Oh, the Hunas were a major factor. These nomadic warriors from Central Asia were constantly raiding Gupta territory. Each raid, even if they were repelled, drained resources and manpower.
It sounds exhausting, constantly on the defensive, never really able to focus on, like, strengthening the empire.
Exactly. It was a constant struggle. But we have to remember, empires are complex. It's rarely one single cause that leads to their downfall.
So the Hunas were a big problem, but there was more to it.
Right. It was a combination of internal weaknesses and these external pressures. And the Guptas, even with their golden age, weren't immune to that.
Okay, so we've got the economic strain, the invaders hammering at the borders, starting to feel like the walls are closing in on these guys. But was there anything going on within the empire itself? Cracks in the foundation, so to speak.
Absolutely. To understand that, we have to look at the Guptas' administrative structure. They were actually quite decentralized, relying on local rulers called Samantas who had quite a bit of autonomy.
Decentralization, I mean, it sounds good, right? Local control, all that.
Correct.
But I can see how it could create problems, too.
You're right. And as the Guptas' central treasury got weaker, the loyalty of those Samantas started to, waver.
They saw weakness at the center.
Yeah, exactly. And they started flexing their muscles, looking for more power, more autonomy.
It's like if a sports team, if the coach loses control.
The players start doing their own thing.
Right. The team spirit disappears.
And that's exactly what started happening within the Gupta Empire. It wasn't just ambition, though. These Samantas had their own problems to deal with, especially as the central government weakened.
So we've had economic troubles, invaders, and now these Samantas are vying for power. Not a good situation.
Definitely not. And what's really interesting is that the Guptas didn't, completely centralize power. They didn't immediately crush rivals as they emerged.
So they were walking a tightrope, trying to balance central authority with giving those Samantas some breathing room. But I'm guessing that balance became impossible to maintain as things went downhill.
Yeah, kind of like juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle. Sooner or later, someone's got to give. And for the Guptas, that delicate balance of power eventually, unraveled.
Okay, so picture this. An empire teetering on the brink, weak from within, facing threats from outside. So how did it all actually go down? Did the Guptas, go down swinging? Or was it more of a slow fade into history?
If you're looking for, a big, epic final battle,
The Alamo.
yeah, something like that, you're going to be disappointed. It wasn't like that. The Gupta decline was much more of a gradual process, like a slow unraveling.
Less of an explosion, more like a slow leak.
Exactly. And it gets even more complex because it wasn't just those Hunas they had to deal with.
Wait, there were more invaders. The Guptas really couldn't catch a break, huh?
Not really, no. They had enemies on multiple fronts to the west.
Like where Afghanistan and Pakistan are now.
Right. And pressure from the north, too. Imagine holding a massive empire together while fighting off attackers from all sides.
Yikes. That's Impossible. And then on top of that, you've got those ambitious Samantas within the empire itself.
Exactly. So the Guptas are fighting a war on two fronts, external and internal, as they struggle to deal with all those external threats.
Their internal problems got worse.
Exactly. Those Samantas, they saw the weakness and they went for it.
Broke away from central control.
Yep. And by this point, the Guptas, their resources are stretched thin, their authority is shaky, it gets harder and harder to maintain order.
It's like, when it rains, it pours.
Right. Everything's going wrong all at once. So what happened next?
Well, did they manage to turn things around? Or was this the end for the Guptas?
Well, holding on to a huge empire in those conditions, it'd be like, I don't know, juggling chainsaws while riding a unicycle.
Sounds dangerous.
Yeah, eventually something has to give. And for the Guptas, it meant that the empire, well, they couldn't keep it together any longer.
So was there a final battle? A last stand?
Not really. The Gupta Empire, it didn't go out with a bang. There wasn't one event that, boom, marked its end. What we see is more of a fragmentation. It gradually split into smaller kingdoms.
Ruled by those independent Samantas.
Exactly, like those centrifugal forces pulling everything apart. They just became too strong to resist.
So a death by 1,000 cuts, not a single blow. Sad end for an empire that was once so powerful. What about the Gupta dynasty itself? Did they just, vanish?
That's where things get really interesting. The Guptas, even though they lost their massive empire, they didn't disappear completely.
Oh.
Yeah, some members of the dynasty, they held on to power, maybe in smaller regions.
Like instead of ruling a vast empire, they were governing smaller kingdoms.
Right. Quite a change. But here's the thing. The name Gupta.
It still had some power.
Yeah. Even centuries later, there were rulers who claimed a connection to the Guptas. Like the name itself carried prestige.
Like a brand name. Even though the original company went out of business, people still recognize the name.
Yeah, exactly. It shows how powerful the Guptas' legacy really was. Even in decline, their name evoked memories of that golden age.
It's amazing how that works, right? How empires can leave such a strong impact even after they're gone. It's like their accomplishments, their ideas, they have a life of their own.
Yeah.
But before we get into all that, we've been talking about emperors and invaders and politics. What about the, regular people during this period? What was it like for them when the Gupta Empire was crumbling around them?
It's a great question, and honestly, it's hard to give a definite answer. See, a lot of the historical records from this time, especially about the Guptas, they focus on
The big picture stuff.
yeah, the wars, the rulers, the rise and fall of empires, the lives of everyday people, not so much.
A great man theory of history.
Right, but we can get some clues from things like archaeological evidence, literature from the period.
Okay, so what can we learn from those sources? How did the Gupta decline affect people's lives?
Well, we can assume that all the warfare, the instability, it disrupted things like trade and agriculture.
Yeah.
Imagine villages being raided, fields left untended, trade routes too dangerous to travel.
Doesn't sound good.
No, and that disruption would have had a direct impact on how people lived. Food shortages, economic hardship, constant insecurity, it wouldn't have been easy.
No wonder those Samantas were so focused on protecting their own territories.
Absolutely. It was probably a matter of survival, not just ambition. And it's important to remember, the decline of an empire, it's not just some abstract historical event. It affects real people's lives in very real ways.
It's a good reminder. History is not just about dates and names. It's about real people living through these events. But amidst all this chaos and hardship, did anything from the Gupta's culture survive? Were there any, bright spots during this time? It's wild, right? The Guptas are dealing with all these problems, the economic troubles, invaders, internal struggles. But they still managed to make incredible advances in culture.
It's a testament to, well, how resilient they were, I guess. Their political power might have been fading, but their contributions to art, literature, science, those things had a lasting impact.
Okay, so let's break it down. What exactly did the Guptas leave behind for us to be impressed by?
Well, art is a big one. The Guptas were huge patrons of the arts. Their reign saw a real flourishing of literature, sculpture, painting.
Imagine walking through a Gupta city, right?
Yeah.
And all this amazing artists surrounding you. What would that even look like?
Think intricate sculptures, incredibly detailed, often depicting Hindu deities, scenes from mythology.
Right, yeah.
There's a focus on grace, elegance, harmony. It really reflects that whole golden age idea.
Capturing the spirit of the time almost. Frozen in art.
Exactly. And it wasn't just visual arts either. Sanskrit literature had a major boom under the Guptas. Some of India's most famous epics, like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata,
Oh yeah, those are huge.
they were developed and codified during this time. Those stories, they're full of heroes, villains, love, loss. They've been passed down for generations and have really shaped Indian culture.
I mean, those epics are still so influential today, not just in India, but all over the world. It's hard to imagine Indian culture without them.
And the Gupta era was really important in preserving and spreading those stories. Imagine them being recited in courts, captivating audiences. It must have been something else. And beyond those epics, there's a whole world of Gupta poetry, drama, philosophy. It gives us a glimpse into their intellectual and spiritual side.
Kind of like these cultural artifacts, they're time machines. They take us back and show us what these people were thinking and feeling. Makes you realize they weren't so different from us, huh?
Right. Still dealing with the same questions about life, death, all that. And speaking of transporting us back in time, we have to talk about Gupta achievements in science and math. They were real pioneers.
Okay, lay some Gupta science on me. What kind of advancements are we talking about?
One of the most famous figures from this time is Aryabhata. Brilliant mathematician, astronomer.
Wait, Aryabhata, didn't he figure out pi?
That's the one. He calculated pi with incredible accuracy for the time. And get this, he also proposed the theory that the Earth spins on its axis.
Whoa, hold on. Back then, most people thought the Earth was the center of the universe, right?
Yeah. So Aryabhata was way ahead of his time.
A true revolutionary.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just him. The Gupta period saw advancements in medicine, metallurgy, all sorts of fields. They really fostered a spirit of inquiry and innovation. Probably one of the reasons why their golden age was so, golden.
So even while everything's falling apart around them, the Guptas are pushing the boundaries of knowledge. Maybe all that adversity actually fueled those achievements. It's a thought.
It's possible. Maybe facing those pressures forced them to find new solutions, new ways of seeing the world. Whatever the reason, their impact is undeniable.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the Gupta Empire, what's the big takeaway here? What should our listeners think about as they, go about their day?
I think the Guptas remind us that even when things are tough, the human spirit can still achieve amazing things. Even in decline, there's creativity, innovation, that desire to learn. And sometimes those things, those ideas, can outlast entire empires.
That's a great point. Their political power might be gone, but their legacy, that's something else. The art, the literature, the science, it's still inspiring today. And it's a good reminder that even in decline, there's still so much to learn from history, so many stories to uncover. So keep those minds curious and keep exploring. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.